Hi, and welcome back to the Church Renewal podcast from Flourish Coaching. I'm your host, Alan Edwards, and we're dropping in your feed today with one of our special listener question episodes. We put out on Facebook and Twitter to our friends and to our colleagues that we're starting this podcast, and we just basically said, what do you want to talk about when it comes to the renewal and revitalization of churches? I've got Matt Bowling, Flourish's executive director, here with me today, and we're looking forward to digging into some of these. We'd love for you to join the conversation with us. So you can reach us by email. I'm alan@flourishcoaching.org. That's ALLAN. You can reach our director, Matt, at flourishcoaching.org by email as well. You can always connect to us on Facebook at tinyurl.com/flourishfb or on Twitter, flourishcoach1. That's flourishcoach and the number 1. Share your thoughts and questions, and maybe you'll be featured on a future episode here of the podcast. Flourish exists to set ministry leaders free with the gospel so that they can be effective wherever God has called them. When pastors or churches feel stuck, our coaches come alongside them to renew their hope and help them gain strategic clarity. All right, let's dig in and explore the ways that Jesus is renewing his church. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Going pretty good. How are you doing?
I love listening to Car Talk. I know it's off the air now.
Yeah, it's too bad.
But
it was really good. You know why it was really good?
Why?
Do you know why? They were having a good time.
They were having a good time.
You had to laugh.
Unlike us, we do not have fun here.
Oh no, we're dead serious.
We're dead serious. So in Car Talk, they always played Stump the Chump.
Yes, my favorite. I actually used to do that in my churches too when I pastored.
Yeah, well, we're not playing Stump the Chump, but we are trying to interact.
Are you calling me a chump?
You are a chump.
Oh!
Could be worse. You could be a jabroni. All right. So we are taking questions from listeners and from our friends and neighbors and colleagues just to understand what is the conversation out there about the renewal of churches. We're really eager to engage in that with others. And so we're going to take a couple questions that we received via social media today. And let's start with this. Rick from Tarentum says the best place to start is asking why revitalizing and renewal are being brought up. Then it all comes down to what you mean by church. Matt, why are we talking and why are pastors talking about revitalization and renewal of their churches?
Well, I think that for a couple of reasons. One is just statistical decline. Tom Rainer estimates that there are 250,000 churches in North America that are threatened with going out of existence because they simply, most of them just age out. People get too old and die and the church can no longer stay alive. And so there are just a lot of churches closing. In our own denomination at PCA, we estimate that we launch a new church once a week and we close a church every 10 days. Very difficult to see the kingdom advance when you're working at that rate.
Sure.
So just the realities on the ground bring up this conversation.
And it's not like we have a saturation of churches.
No.
Like the number of churches to citizens in the U.S. as a ratio, yeah, it's lower than it was 100 years ago. It's not higher.
Right. So that's the church per capita, right, is lower. So even though we're planting a lot of churches, we're closing more than we're planting, and we're not keeping up with even population growth.
Now, is the conversation about church renewal and revitalization simply about keeping every church that exists open?
No, absolutely not. Because there are some churches, you look at Revelation 2 and 3, and Jesus threatens churches that won't repent, that won't turn from the things that displease him. The way that I put it very simply, bluntly, is Jesus says, if you don't change, I'm going to leave and I'm going to take the light with me. And so then those aren't dead letters. There's another reason, though, that we should be interested in the renewal and revitalization of churches. God is.
Yeah.
Look at the New Testament.
Yeah.
Everything, even some of Acts is about Paul's second missionary journey. He goes and encourages the churches, right? That's how are they doing? All of Paul's letters, Hebrews, first part of Revelation, what are they all about? They're all about churches that have lost their way.
Existing churches that have
lost their way. So God's heart is with struggling churches. He wants them to be renewed. And so we ought to have an interest in it. That's why this conversation is coming up. This was missed the last couple of decades. This was a complete miss by the church in America.
Well, and I think the church in America has kind of reduced the conversation about church renewal and revitalization just to churches that are in danger of closing.
Right.
But we would say that the conversation about renewing our church should be a conversation that every church is having?
Absolutely. So we've said this before, but we'll say it again, which is any Christian ever finished being sanctified? No,
Right.
not till Jesus comes back. Church is the same thing. It's a collection of people. Church is never fully sanctified. And so the point is that every church is in need of some degree of renewal. Now, there are degrees of renewal. I think we got another question we're going to take a little bit later about that. But so the concept is that actually every church ought to be looking at itself year by year and saying, how do we need to be renewed?
Right.
It's the churches that don't do that, actually, that are in danger of needing more severe things, and maybe even in danger of going out of existence.
Yeah. So Rick follows up his initial question, why is this conversation coming up, with what do we mean by church? And he says, what do we mean by church, capital C? So when we say that the church needs to be renewed, capital C church, what do we mean?
I think you could take it a couple of different ways. When you look at the scriptures as it uses that word church, it can mean everything from a small house church that would have been probably under 40 people, all the way up to the church in a region, or the church, right? Now,
the entire body of Jesus.
The entire body of Jesus, frankly, when you look all over the world, is doing exceptionally well, right?
Okay.
The gospel's advancing in Asia and South America, in Africa, in absolutely beautiful, wonderful ways. There's lots of people coming to Christ.
Yeah.
Just not in Western Europe or North America very much. And so when we say church, the universal church is frankly doing okay. Jesus promised that the gates of hell would not prevail. It's coming true. Yeah. But we're not seeing it as much in our midst as we used to. And that ought to concern us.
Yeah.
Because surely Jesus' interest has not left having vital congregations in North America.
When we use the word church, I think most of us think immediately of individual congregations. And for some people, in the way they've structured their church, that really is the physical representation of their church. They're a one-off, independent, truly independent, unconnected church.
Sure.
But even for congregational churches, there are associations.
Yes.
For, Methodists and Missionary Alliance, there are districts. For Episcopalians and Anglicans, there are dioceses. For Presbyterians, there are presbyteries. And then there are denominations, right? The PCA, Presbyterian Church in America, the Christian Missionary Alliance, the Evangelical Free Church in America. When we talk about church renewal, are we simply, I'm teeing you up here, but we're not just talking about the renewal of congregations.
Sure.
What does it mean for districts, presbyteries, denominations to be pursuing renewal?
Yeah, it's a critical question. It's one of the places, interestingly, that Flourish does work that a lot of people, that not many people are, which is what would it mean for our context, being Alan and I are both ordained in the Presbyterian Church in America, but what does it mean for us, for a presbytery to be renewed? That's a really critical thing, because Jesus isn't just interested in the health of individual congregations. He's interested in the health of a church and a geography. Recognize that some of those letters that were written by Paul were to churches covering a whole geography, a district, a diocese, right? A presbytery. And so God is interested in healthy collections of churches as well, whether they be in a presbytery or district or denominationally. I think denominations have to look and see primarily at the high level, and we're privileged to work with denominations, which is fun. Have we lost our missionary impulse? Not international, not our world missionary impulse, but our local one. We work with a denomination that struggles to plant, a couple of them actually, that struggle to plant churches. And their
resources are going to global missions, but in their pursuit of global missions, they've stopped feeding home missions in some ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They've stopped having interest in the kingdom and advancing here, frankly, to put it bluntly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, this is a great first question from a friend of Flourish. And so, Rick, thanks for sending this in. We think, obviously, that there is a reason to have this conversation about renewal and revitalization. And we're going to try to keep that conversation going for the local congregation, for the regions and districts, and for the denominations, and for the church. Right? We are all to be renewed in our hearts and minds as we submit to and walk with Jesus. So thanks for listening today to our listener question here on the Church Renewal podcast. We'd love to hear questions and comments from you. You can reach our director, Matt at flourishcoaching.org. You can find me on Twitter, EdwardsAE1 on Twitter, or by email, alan@flourishcoaching.org. You can reach us on our Facebook page, tinyurl.com/Facebook. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast with your friends so we can broaden the conversation about church renewal. You know, we do this because we believe at Flourish there's only one fully sufficient reason that today dawned. Jesus is still gathering his people and advancing his kingdom through the work of the church. So join us as we pray for renewed churches and as we dig into the ways that Jesus is renewing his church.